Hi everyone, please subscribe my YouTube channel. After I turned down handing over my inheritance to my mother, she asked me to come to a family gathering. When I got there, they had attorneys prepared to pressure me into transferring it. But the second they passed me the documents, I grinned and replied, amusing, I brought a guest as well. The entrance swung open and I never anticipated ending up in this spot. Positioned opposite my own parent and the remainder of my alleged relatives, observing them attempt to seize what was legally mine. But there I stood. Allow me to rewind a little. My father was the sole true guardian I had during my upbringing. He wasn't flawless, but he labored diligently, provided for me, and above all, he was equitable. My mother, conversely. She was self-centered, controlling, and constantly portrayed herself as the injured party. They separated when I was young, and truthfully, it was the greatest outcome that could have occurred for him. When my dad died last year, it was abrupt. Cardiac arrest. No indication. One moment we were discussing at last embarking on that angling excursion to Canada, and the following I was selecting his coffin. It devastated me, but what followed, that was nearly more painful. His testament was explicit. All assets went to me. The residence, the funds, the portfolios, all of it. He had insured it because he understood my mother's character. He even mentioned to me once, she'll pursue it, kid. Stay prepared. I believed I was, but I misjudged how desperate she would become. Not even 7 days post-burial, she began phoning. Initially, it was the phony worry. How are you coping, dear? Then, it evolved into blame shifting. You realize, without me, you wouldn't have enjoyed the existence your father provided you. And ultimately, direct commands. You must act correctly and divide it with your relatives. By relatives, she implied herself, her spouse, whom she wedded 2 years after abandoning Dad, and their 2 prized offspring, my step-siblings. Individuals who hardly communicated with my dad. Individuals who never extended aid to him, even during his hospital stay. I informed her no, repeatedly. That's when matters turned nasty. She began appearing at my residence without notice, pounding on the entrance. When I ceased responding, she had my stepsister record extended, theatrical messages about how I was destroying this household. Then arrived the intimidations. She asserted she would challenge the testament, that she would prolong this in litigation for ages. I maintained my position. Then, unexpectedly, I received a request for a family assembly. That should have been my initial warning sign. My household never convened for anything except to stir conflict, but something about it seemed unusual. The phrasing was strange, excessively official. I nearly skipped it. But then an instinct urged me I had to witness their scheme. When I entered my mother's home that day, I instantly realized I had stepped into a trap. The sitting area was arranged like some sort of tribunal. My mother occupied the middle beside her spouse, arrogant as always. My step-siblings were present too, appearing far too satisfied with themselves. And then there were the 2 gentlemen in business attire, attorneys. I didn't receive even a greeting. One of the attorneys rose and stated, "We're assembled to address the appropriate allocation of your father's properties." I nearly chuckled. Appropriate allocation? He presented me a hefty pile of forms. This is an updated pact. It details an equitable split of the legacy among all direct kin. I scanned through it. They desired me to relinquish 75% of all items, the residence, the funds, even my dad's vehicle. I glanced at my mother. You must be joking. She exhaled theatrically as if I were some rebellious youngster. This is the optimal resolution for all. You don't require everything. Be sensible. Sensible? They aimed to confiscate all that my father earned. All he bequeathed to me, and they assumed I would simply yield and permit them. I inhaled deeply and grinned. Amusing, I stated, placing the forms on the tea table. I brought a guest as well. The entrance flung open. And in stepped my attorney. But not simply any attorney. My father's attorney. The one who composed his testament. The one who recognized every single protective measure my dad implemented to stop precisely this from occurring. My mother's complexion turned ashen. Her spouse fidgeted uneasily in his chair. My attorney wasted no moment. He retrieved their purported pact and browsed it. Then, without raising his gaze, he remarked, "This is charming. Unlawful, but charming." One of the opposing attorneys cleared his throat. We maintained that under the conditions, a reallocation, my attorney interrupted him. "Allow me to halt you immediately. The testament is unbreakable. Any effort to dispute it will be dismissed from the courtroom. And if you dare attempt to pressure my client into relinquishing his legacy, we will file accusations for deception and attempted coercion." Absolute quiet. Then my mother's tone, piercing and frantic. "You wouldn't execute that. You wouldn't sue your own parent. I gazed her straight in the eyes. Test me. The space was hushed. Nobody ventured to stir. My mother, who always possessed a retort, merely glared at me as if she failed to identify the individual before her. My stepsister, typically brimming with false empathy, abruptly appeared as though she wished to vanish into the sofa. My stepfather. He was clutching the armrest so firmly his knuckles had blanched. Then the attorney beside my mother cleared his throat. There's no requirement for aggression. We're merely attempting to reach a consensual arrangement. Consensual arrangement, nonsense. I crossed my arms and reclined in my seat. A consensual arrangement would have involved consulting me prior to having an attorney prepare a file that robs what's mine. My attorney closed the pact and let it fall on the table. This file wouldn't survive in court for 2 moments. And if you believe my client is endorsing anything today, you're delusional. My mother breathed out sharply. This is absurd. I directed to her. No, what's absurd is you attempting to influence me into surrendering all my dad bequeathed me. Her tone became harsh. He didn't bequeath it to you because he cherished you more. He simply failed to consider thoroughly. You don't need all of it. Your kin merit their equitable portion. I tightened my jaw. My kin. You refer to the 2 individuals who scarcely recognized Dad was alive. The ones who never saw him in the medical facility, never phoned him on his birthday, never assisted when he was ill. They merit nothing at all. My stepbrother, who had remained silent in the corner until then, abruptly retorted, "That's unjust. We weren't bonded to him because he never endeavored with us. He always preferred you." I pivoted to confront him. "You mean the gentleman you labeled a has-been failure the last occasion he invited you for holiday dinner?" That gentleman. He flushed but remained mute. Then my stepfather, who had been quiet up to that point, leaned ahead. "Listen, boy," I interrupted him. "Don't address me that way." His expression shadowed, but he compelled a counterfeit grin. "Fine. Look, we can all remain here and debate, or we can discover a method to benefit everyone." My attorney smirked. "Oh, we have discovered a method to benefit. It's termed adhering to the testament." Then my attorney delved into his portfolio and extracted a dossier. He pushed it across the table toward my mother's attorney. "That includes a complete lawful analysis of the testament, duplicates of my client's entitlements, and a halt and desist directive. If you or your parties persist in bothering my client for funds, we will seek judicial recourse." My mother's attorney perused the pages, his expression becoming graver with each second. That's when my mother erupted. She rose so swiftly her seat almost toppled. "You would inflict this on your own household?" I looked up at her. "You ceased being my household the instant you attempted to rob from me." Her hands balled into fists. "You believe you're superior to us, don't you?" I merely stared at her. And then she performed something that chilled my blood. She grinned. Not a standard grin, a deliberate one. She reseated herself, straightened her top, and exhaled. All right, all right." She motioned to her attorney. "We won't contest it. That was too simple, far too simple." My attorney must have detected it too because he squinted. "Excellent. Then we'll depart." We collected our items and headed to the exit, but right as I crossed the threshold, my mother shouted after me, "Maintain that residence, dear." I halted, pivoted back. Her grin lingered. You never know when mishaps might occur. The follicles on my nape rose. I said nothing, just departed. But as I motored home, her statements reverberated in my mind. Something was amiss. And I was soon to discover how extreme my mother was prepared to escalate. I scarcely rested that evening. My mother's statements kept repeating in my thoughts. "Maintain that residence, dear. You never know when mishaps might occur." It wasn't merely a remark. It was an intimidation. I attempted to dismiss it. Perhaps she was just theatrical, aiming to frighten me into reconsidering my stance, but something in her gaze indicated otherwise. The following dawn, I went to inspect the residence. I hadn't relocated yet, too many recollections, but I intended to eventually. It remained my dad's spot, and the idea of another inhabiting there felt incorrect. I entered the driveway and instantly sensed my gut plummet. The entry door was ajar. I knew absolutely I had secured it. I entered, my pulse racing. The residence had been vandalized, sofa pillows torn apart, compartments yanked out and emptied on the ground. My dad's mounted images fractured, and centrally in the sitting area, scrawled in crimson aerosol across the wall, was a single term, crook. I balled my fists. I didn't need to speculate who orchestrated it. I retrieved my device and contacted authorities. While awaiting, I examined the remainder of the residence. The destruction was severe, but nothing appeared taken. This wasn't theft. It was a signal. When the officers arrived, I recounted all details. The intimidations, the legacy dispute, the The purported family assembly. The officers recorded posed a few inquiries, but I could sense they wouldn't achieve much. Without surveillance recordings or observers, it's difficult to establish who was involved, one remarked. I nearly laughed. As if I didn't know precisely who was accountable. I submitted the complaint regardless. If for no other reason, I desired it documented. Then, I executed something I knew my mother and her band of robbers wouldn't anticipate. I set up surveillance devices. And not just a few inexpensive ones, I invested fully. Superior resolution, infrared activation on movement devices encompassing every potential access. The entry, the rear, the storage, even the corridor within. Then I bided. Indeed, they couldn't restrain themselves. 4 evenings later at 2:37 a.m., my device vibrated with a notification. Movement sensed. Rear yard. I jolted awake, seized my device, and accessed the real-time stream. And there she appeared, my mother. Clad in dark attire, sneaking around my dad's residence with a beam light. But she wasn't solitary. Her spouse accompanied her, holding what seemed like a container of fuel. I sensed my blood freeze. I activated recording on the surveillance stream and dialed emergency services. Emergency? What's your crisis? My mother and her spouse are attempting to ignite my residence. The operator requested specifics, but I scarcely registered her. I was occupied observing in astonishment as my own mother passed her spouse at igniter. Then, the alarms began. They must have detected them too, because abruptly they freaked. My mother snatched the container from his grasp, and both fled sprinting toward the road. But it was overdue. The authorities arrived before they could flee. I observed via the device as my mother yelled at the officers, attempting to fabricate some tale about how they were merely inspecting the premises. But the fuel in her possession contradicted otherwise. And when the officers examined the container, verifying it was filled with accelerant, that concluded it. They were detained immediately. I motored directly there, reaching just as they were being placed into the rear of the patrol vehicle. My mother spotted me and began shrieking. You framed me. You orchestrated this against me. I glared at her, my mandible tightened so firmly I thought my enamel might shatter. No, mother, I stated, my tone steady. You orchestrated this against yourself. She surged ahead, but the authorities restrained her. That was the final occasion I viewed her in person, but the narrative wasn't concluded, because what transpired next, that was the true surprise. The authorities transported my mother and her spouse to detention that evening. I remained there in the chill, observing as the blinking crimson and azure illuminations bounced off the asphalt. My palms were still trembling, not from dread but from rage. They had schemed to incinerate my residence, my dad's residence. And for what? Malice, retaliation, or sheer avarice, whatever the motive, I was finished. Finished offering them opportunities. Finished wishing they'd act properly. Finished allowing them to trample me like I was still some naive youth. This occasion, they were going to encounter genuine repercussions. The aftermath over the subsequent days was a haze of authority documents, attorney sessions, and judicial papers. My mother faced charges of attempted incineration and plotting to commit an offense. Her spouse received identical. And since my surveillance devices had captured all in superior clarity, their attorneys lacked much leverage. The highlight, since she was already precarious with creditors and had a record of monetary issues, the magistrate refused her release pending trial. She had to remain incarcerated until her hearing. My step-siblings, the two privileged ingrates who believed they merited a portion of my legacy, attempted to separate themselves. My stepsister recorded me an extended, emotional message about how she was unaware mother would do something so insane and that she wished we could remain kin. I didn't reply. My stepbrother, the one who dubbed my dad a fated failure, dispatched a brief message. Hey dude, I was unaware of this. Wish you well. I ignored him. They might not have participated in the incineration plot, but they certainly knew what my mother was capable of. They were delighted to assist in pressuring me to surrender my legacy, but the moment matters escalated, they fled. Not my issue. The hearing, it required about 6 months for the matter to reach trial. My mother attempted all maneuvers to escape it. She alleged she was unaware the container held fuel, that she was just inspecting the residence because she was concerned for me. Then she altered approaches. Alleged I framed her, that I had enticed her there, and placed proof to appear as incineration. That notion collapsed when the accuser showed the surveillance recordings to the panel. There she was, clear as daylight, gripping a beam, directing where her spouse should spill the fuel. There he was, extracting an igniter from his pouch. The panel required under 2 hours to deliver a decision. culpable. She received a 10-year term. Her spouse got 12 since he was the one grasping the igniter. They both sought to challenge. They failed. Fairness delivered with them absent, I at last had tranquility, no further intimidations, no further midnight rings, no further anxiety. I retained the residence, repaired the destruction, substituted the damaged images of my dad. I even mounted a duplicate of the halt and desist directive my attorney dispatched them, just as a memento of how extreme they escalated and how much they forfeited. As for my step-siblings, I never communicated with them again. Last I learned, my stepsister was overwhelmed in loan debts, and my stepbrother was shifting between positions, still accusing others for his troubles. Not my worry. They selected their paths, just like my mother did, and ultimately they all received precisely what they earned.